Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks out there. Welcome to the channel RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ. I hope you have your remedies, you visited your herbalist. I hope that you have brought some hand sanitizer, gone to the apothecary, because today, as we've done all week long, we're talking about diseases, infections, viruses, parasites, those insidious things, and we are talking about them in the context of tabletop role-playing games. And today, along our weekly demi-daily deep dive, today is Third Pillar Thursday, which is one of my passions, but it tends to be an atrophied muscle in many role-playing games. So what is the third pillar? Well, the first and second pillar in general is considered combat and social interactions in tabletop RPGs. But the third pillar is exploration. And my little armchair definition doesn't just include going to unknown locations and discovering dangers and mysteries, which is part of it, but it's also having the environment have an impact in the game. The environment itself, location, the movie set, the location of the graphic novel, the place where the combat takes place should have both a mechanical and a very memorable narrative element to it. I am a huge proponent of it, and believe you me, a fist fight is nothing if not based in a location, especially on the wing of a plane, on the membrane of an airship, on a crumbling rock, inside of a turbulent volcano, on the docks of a seaside city during a storm with towering waves, white-capped waves spilling across the deck, those kind of things. But sometimes we have a subject that doesn't lend itself very easily to the third pillar of exploration, the thing I'm very passionate about. So passionate about, as a matter of fact, that I am a contributing writer to Critical Hit Publishing, and my series, The Cinematic Environs, are a series of books produced that do nothing but explore those areas and give someone a spark of inspiration and even rules and rulings on how to incorporate things like frostbite or heat exhaustion, navigation and getting lost, and natural traps, puzzles, riddles, obstacles, layers, and all those things all combined together into one dramatic miasma that I feel like the players should be exploring and help to develop your world. So, since we're talking about diseases and parasites and infestations, it goes to show that there should really be a world in which these things are problematic, that they are lethal, they are far more common. It is something that is a worry for the players to engage in. And much like the players going through a vast desert and worrying about dehydration and getting lost and hallucinations, or trudging through a frozen tundra worrying about frostbite and, of course, getting lost as well, stumbling into unseen pits in the thick snow, slipping and falling, being blinded in a blizzard or whatnot. The same hazards can actually happen in a place filled with the possibility of diseases and parasites and infestations and viruses, bacteria, but they don't see them. And in this sense, one of the locations that really come to mind is someplace like a swamp, a place where life, death, decomposition, life coming from death seems to be a thing that would absolutely positively, sorry that I faded away from the camera, would absolutely positively be a threat simply by being present in and around this location. Yes, this is my co-host Tia. She's deaf. She's at least 20 years old, but she wants to come up after her breakfast. Sorry about that, guys. So a some place where this cycle of death and life and death again, one built on top of another, should be a threat. Even should be part of the natural order. Now, it's possible that we've talked about diseases and parasites and infestations in living sentient things, people, humanoids, monsters, being the progenitors of said locations. But there's also the idea of these same things happening to the natural world, the non-sentient part of the world, meaning plants and the environment, the foods, crops, harvests, that kind of thing. Stagnant water is another idea. Wells being poisoned. Sometimes this can be thought of in a more arcane level. A place that is cursed, a place that is accursed, it must be blessed or something. If the curse isn't lifted by a particular time, everyone will die from starvation or get sick from the poisoned water table or something. We've even seen this happen where an accursed place literally undergoes a transformation when a curse is lifted, and you see dead trees and plants literally sprouting life again, visibly before the naked eye. There's also the scientific form of this. Maybe something spreads a we in our modern setting have restrictions on taking goods from one location to another for fear that we spread a disease, or we bring in something that will overgrow a particular area, sometimes known as like in the southern portion of the states. There's something known as kudzu, a plant that has grown and exploded all over. Hey, thanks for joining us, Allie. There's so many things that can happen into a world, and this could just be a transitional phase, right? If your world, we often talk about intergalactic societies and ancient civilizations that have lived a millennium. The idea that a disease has spread and wiped out a major portion of the population is just, it might just literally be a footnote in 1,000 years of history, much like it happened in our own history. We've had the Black Plague, we've had potato famine, we've had polio outbreaks. We've had many disease outbreaks, and we've had many times the Black Blizzard in the middle of the states, and I'm sure these things have happened around the world more often than not. And when you start to stretch time periods longer and longer, a lot of that stuff starts to fade into the background. It doesn't mean that this isn't the period of time happening in your world, in the history of your world, while your PCs are going through it. I can guarantee you that despite how short the period of time people went through it, the ones who did live through it thought it shaped the very nature of their life, right? So, a famine in a particular country that lasts for 15 years, while not mattering much in a 300-year cycle, for those 15 years, those people saw death and destruction and crime and debauchery and all kinds of things, people being backstabbed and all that kind of stuff to try to get yet one more meal, and it would shape their outlook on life. So why not have in your setting, instead of getting to the end of the equation, why not deal with the drama of adding 1+1 into your world? Now, for a world in which disease does run rampant and such, I would suggest for the, especially in the environment, for the tabletop RPG community, that the danger is not just seeing something ahead of you. It's not just your senses, your eyes, your ears, what you touch, what you smell, which is very important when using description. but it's also the knowledge and the history of I see something, which means this is far more dangerous than it would see on the surface. Brought up yesterday about seeing a dead carcass, you know, or seeing piles of offal or feces or what have you. Seeing a fresh kill. And while normally seeing a dead carcass might just lead you to understand there's a predator nearby, which very well could be, it may also be, did this thing die from some kind of infestation? Is the thing that killed it still around? Is the thing that died carrying some kind of disease or some kind of parasite we need to watch out for? Is the predator that killed this that downed this carcass mad with rage and pain from having something eating it from the inside out? Is this thing infecting me right now? Is it on my flesh? Is it on my skin? And then looking around and feeling bugs, pitter pat against the skin of your face and arms and legs, and seeing bugs swarm around the carcass itself, and wondering if you're being bitten by while they might seem nuisances at first, being bitten by mosquitoes that carry other, laying their eggs inside of you, and bugs trying to infiltrate in and under your skin and, feed upon the very blood of your body and depositing eggs and having them grow and carrying diseases on them, and seeing flocks of carrion birds flying overhead, and maybe there are other predatory animals that feed on the dead carcasses and are growing stronger and becoming ever more diseased as well. And so it's not just what's in front of the players, but the danger of what it foretells, what it foreshadows for the future in your world. And as far as the dead things like trees, plants, and such, stagnant water seems to come to mind, dusty, barren plains, forests with no trees and such. Those things themselves could be hazards as well. We don't need to have our players on a green screen. I make a green screen reference, meaning that essentially describing the background, but it doesn't have an effect on the player characters. You could just swap out one green screen for another, and it has no effect on the people walking on a flat plane. But if your world has such barren and broken landscape that they're walking across the surface of a ground that's crumbling beneath them, but when they look down in the cracks and the crevices, which could barely fit their bodies, maybe the cracks go down for 10, 30, 100 feet or more, that there are these tight crevices below them, and maybe something down there can reach up and grab them. Or if the PCs make a misstep, the ground will crumble beneath their feet, tumbling them down into these tight cavities. And sure, you could mimic the effects of, say, a pit trap or something, a very natural environment as they look across what to the naked eye looks like a flat plane, and very well may look that way, but underneath their feet, it's just crumbling beneath them with cavities like Swiss cheese or something. You could have the land itself, much like the black blizzard that swept across the middle America, or middle of the United States at one point, literally killing people from the dust that was invading their lungs. Maybe in this world there are dust storms or dust devils and things that sweep across the landscape because the soil no longer has nutrients in it from all of the dead the dead foliage and whatnot. And that comes to mind dead trees. Dead trees could definitely present a hazard, hiding adversaries behind them. Of course, you have to have yourself some bandits of goblinoids or whatnot. They could be hiding enemies behind the trees, either as a natural barrier or one where the dead trees have been stacked together. It could become a climbing hazard. It could be cover for themselves, for the PCs to hide behind, snipe, like a very good sniper's position. It may also be a location with a combination of cover and climbing hazard, and a place where the PCs need to slip and try to squeeze into a tight location, especially if they are attacked by, massive beasts or tunneling boulets or sand sharks or purple worms or some other types of insects or something, and the PCs may need to squeeze inside of these piles of trees, and all of that can also be used and abused by both the player characters and the NPCs in your world. And the environment doesn't necessarily need to be one thing. It could be both, like, again, a pile of dead trees and their limbs and branches and trunks, stacked on top of each other like kindling, can both be cover from enemies and a hazard to climb in it or squeeze inside or whatnot, and try to reconsider what your choices are. Also, there's the possibility of not being existent in a flat plane. Everything doesn't need to be a flat plane. You can have deep gorges that are only passable by crossing over trees that have fallen on their side and have spanned vast chasms, and the PCs have to, hold their arms out to balance across a great chasm because something dangerous is following them. There's a possibility of, wood can be kindling if it's dead and dry, and so forest fires or fires sweeping across, say, tall grass may be a hazard as well, especially if it's subject to very dry, again, like kindling or something. An errant bolt of lightning, an errant source of flame could ignite the entire thing, sweeping smoke and ash across it. Matter of fact, tall grass is a hazard as well. It's both cover for both the PCs and their adversaries. There are many game effects which require you to actually see your opponent or see your allies, and if they are not visible in tall grass, even if they're only a few steps ahead, whether it's 5, 10, 30-foot distance or more than 2 squares ahead, and you can't see them, you can hear them. Maybe you can see the grass swaying back and forth, but it's, the grass is half again as tall as a humanoid or something, and so not being able to see them may mean you can't lend them assistance. You may not be able to, misty step near their area because you can't see the location you're going to teleport to. You can't see someone to offer them help through, like, a bless or a healing factor or something like that. The same goes with enemies as well. If you can't see your enemies, you may hear that there are many enemies, but you're only confronted with 3 of them, and you may not know how many may be surrounding you or tracking you, or how many enemies are attacking your allies at the exact same time. Or if someone were, or multiple people were to go down unconscious, paralyzed, incapacitated, etc., you may literally need to trip over them before you see them. So all of these things can be hazards that you can include in your setting, in a setting where disease and parasites and stuff have run rampant, as well as the fact that I understand random encounters have pretty much fallen to the wayside in today's 5th edition of the world's most popular game, but a well-cultivated and well-designed random encounter table, rolling on it once an hour or once every period of time, like dawn, day, dusk, and night, or however you want to manage it. Whether you roll percentile dice, or there's a 1 in 6 chance, or the 1 in 6 chance increases to 2 in 6 or 3 in 6, etc., based on the noise the player characters are causing, or the location they go to, or hell, they may be the cause of their own random encounter by leaving dead carcasses in their wake. For the most part, player characters tend to kill things and not worry about the aftermath, but the aftermath of those things that they've killed may lend themselves to further hazards. Mick Warwick, butchering the name, MKRAWEC, McCrawick in the in the comment section has left a couple of really good comments, and goes to say from like yesterday's video. He says, "Hey, um, it occurred to me this morning, and that was yesterday, that maybe people with diseased humors don't barf up ooze. Maybe the ooze seeps out of their orifices and pores after they die, like a person who dies of Ebola and has to be buried in a plastic bag because they keep liquefying post mortem." I cannot agree with that more. The slaying of a troll is one thing, but leaving the carcasses around, and I bring up trolls, but they are they are a placeholder for just about anything killed. Killing it is one thing. Understanding that killing it and spewing its dead body that maybe moments, minutes, hours, days later, you're creating the very hazards that are becoming so lethal in this region, could be a real thing in this world. And so yes, you killed the troll. Good for you. You didn't burn or you know spill acid or salt or whatever over top of the body. Yep. Dead Man says, "Isn't that the purpose of body bags?" If I'm not mistaken, I believe that is the reason why they. What's the ubiquitous body bag? It's black with like handles on four corners, and it has that zipper that comes up and then curves when it gets to the top, or I guess it would be the equivalent of the bottom. It zips all the way up and is to be completely sealed to either not prevent decomposition, but prevent the decomposition from affecting the environment around you, whether it is scent. There are many animals out there and other things that smell decomposition, and that's not to make light of those who have died. It's just a fact, right? The liquefying of the body, the human body comes there. Jesus, we're talking about decomposition. Anyway, I don't want to get too deep into that. I have, and you can go down the deep rabbit hole of discovering the different stages of decomposition, and in a world in which life is spawning from death itself, that can happen very quickly over a very short amount of time. And why not, again, I use the term turn the volume up to 11, right? Why not have, when things die in your world, they don't have to come back through, they don't have to be the undead. It could be other living things, spawning themselves inside of the, the carcasses of the dead or the half dead or whatnot. Not just sticking a blade into the troll's stomach and being splashed with acid or ooze or some kind of infestation, but there might be, who's to say that you don't kill a creature and within an hour it's already, covered with a swarm of insects and other things that are growing rapidly to go after you. But in this disease and infectious world as well, the PCs really should, in my idea of third pillarisms, they really should take pause when it comes to poking and prodding things. And hell, even just killing something. For example, the player characters may make a kill to leave it there because they know there's something out there that can smell the decomposition, and it's just a matter of hiding from it. If there's, much like creatures that have thermal vision or sonar, tremor sense, I don't know, being able to see the tendrils of magical weavings or something. Having a creature that only uses one primary sense that isn't vision is a possibility as well. Also, heck, the simple act of staying clean might be extremely dangerous. Might be extremely useful in a world where it's very dangerous not to keep yourself clean. Sure, it's cool to have blood splattered over your outfit and gristle dangling from your edged weapons, but it doesn't lend itself to cleanliness. And So yeah, the barbarian that's like, yeah, I like to be bathed in blood might be the target of so many other things as the rot starts to smell and the maggots are filling up in their backpacks and the flies are buzzing around their heads because it can just smell and trying to feed on the blood and gristle and brain matter that's covering their bodies and such. So yeah. Now, in our own world, and we can use these as examples from our own world, when you take a look at, and you can deep dive in this on Wikipedia, some diseases that spread in areas that are prone to it, and you'll find that a lot of those diseases are spread through a particular vector. Now, again, one of those vectors are other living things, meaning like spread through rats, spread through mosquitoes, spread through fleas and ticks, that kind of thing. There are also, I'm going to say, consumable vectors, meaning like sources of what we would consider fresh water and fresh foods like berries, roots, nuts, diseases, seeds, plant matter, and things may very well be diseased. As a matter of fact, we already know that sometimes crops are bad after they've come to during the harvest season because the apples, the tomatoes, the bananas, whatever your favorite fruit and or veggie out there is, could be diseased. Tubers like potatoes and sweet potatoes and radishes and whatnot could be diseased, and it might be the choice between a community that feels like they're starving and deciding to try to eat or cut away the diseased portions. That might not be a good idea. Also, something that I thought of is necromancy in a lot of fantasy realms brings the dead to life. The mindless undead zombies and skeletons, of course, automatically come to mind. But we don't often see them diseased in the first place while they're walking around. And so what I love are BFF creatures. I love myself to combine some BFF creatures. And depending on how you want to do this, the BFF creature might not particularly be best friends, best friends forever. They might be under considerable harassment or pain because of it. Meaning, like, let's take your average zombie or something. That zombie might be infested with an insect swarm, and so the zombie itself might be in the very center of an insect swarm stacked on top of it. So PC wants to fight the zombie, sure. You're also going to be attacked by an insect swarm swarming, flying around it or something. The troll that you stab and it spills out one of the very colorful oozes that are in the world, right? Why not have that happen where, hey, when it gets knocked down to half its hit points, you just spawned an ooze in your space. Congratulations. I'm happy for you. Now if you do this, please foreshadow this event. That, as a matter of fact, you can even set a hazard timer even against your own adversaries. PCs get attacked by the troll. Maybe the troll. Well, okay, let's change that. Let's keep it. Okay, so the troll might only live for like 4 rounds. Like you're describing your narrative as saying, hey, this thing is mad with rage. It's actually rabid. It's almost lost its mind because what's inside of it is eating it from the inside out. And so you've already established on the 4th round, it's going to keel over and die as whatever's inside of it bursts forth out into that space. But the player characters, even with the description, may or may not know this. So maybe it's more efficient for the PC to run and hide from it, and allow the 4 rounds to go by and it'll die on its own. Or maybe the PCs are like, I'm going to slash it open and leave it in its space because we're being hunted by goblinoid bandits, and maybe they'll come across the carcass as well and stick their nasty foot into the ooze that's seeping out of the stomach acid of the troll, right? It's about making the encounters themselves extremely dynamic, and even if it means stacking your adversaries. Unlike a very basic video game, your enemies don't need to be preloaded to encounter your PCs, right? Meaning, like, you don't have to have. It's the proverbial PC's open dungeon door, and there's an enemy inside just waiting for them to open a dungeon door, right? That's not very immersive, but it can be very immersive if your animals are chewing on a carcass, if your creatures are stumbling along in the dead forest because they've been infected by something that they, after an attack, the ogre with a tree trunk, a broken limb in its hand, like a giant club or something, but it's holding its side because its side has little pale maggots falling from the wound that was given to it when it attacked something with claws or horns or whatever, and it's stumbling past the PCs while they're hiding behind the fallen dead trees in this vast blackened wood or something, right? It's the immersion of what's going on in your world. Is there something dangerous in the world? You can foreshadow this even with an adversary. And again, if you've got a monster manual or whatever game you're playing and you've got enemies, by the way, you're not going to run out of monsters. Does that mean you're going to throw a monster in there for it just to end up dying and the PCs ignore it? So what? You've got plenty of opportunity to throw a whole bunch more on top of them, right? Hell, we know the classic ghouls and the leaders, the gas, feed on the dead and eat dead bodies. How fresh are the dead? How much decomposition has the dead gone through? Are they feeding on the dead, but they're literally propagating something far more dangerous? Could you tell that there's a tribe of ghouls stumbling through the woods by looking at the carrion birds circling above their heads? Maybe there's something the ghouls are eating that's just too much for their digestive tracts or something, and maybe the ghouls themselves are diseased, or maybe the ghouls aren't affected by it at all, and they're covered with insects or maggots or what's the proverbial rot grubs or something like that, literally spilling from their claws or their mouths and whatnot, and might be something pretty nasty, as maybe the ghouls have sacks of dead body parts as they carry them with them as they trudge through the dead forests or whatever, or the sickly swamp, and the PC's like, oh, I'm gonna look for their treasure, opens up the bag, it's just nasty. It's like, hell, just even smelling something like that, if you're incorporating sanity rules of some type in your world, seeing things, chewing on each other and having chest-bursting monsters out there might be a thing there. Hey, Darth. Thank you very much for joining in the Twitch chat there, Darth, and everyone else out there. Yes, located below the video, this show is simulcast on 3 platforms, Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, my time. Now, along with stacking your creatures, and again, they don't necessarily need to be in alignment. Much like me talking about carrion birds circling over ghouls, it could just be a side effect of the world. So the ghouls don't control the vultures or the ravens above them, but the side effect is, if the vultures follow the ghouls, they're going to find dead things, and we can eat upon those dead things. And so it might just be happenstance, much like, I don't know, water buffalo or dragon turtles walking along with other birds living on their backs, like birds sitting on the back of like water buffalo or cows eating the fleas or ticks or something. It could just happen through a naturalism. It could happen through it can happen through some kind of sentience, meaning like a hag themselves may control a flock of ravens around them, feeding them little bits and pieces of dead flesh from its victims or something. Deadman says White Wolf had the game Werewolf the Apocalypse, which had the Fomori, who could have worms as a power, which the Fomori could vomit up to devour an opponent. Exactly. And again, we want new and interesting and surprising experiences. Now, when I say new and interesting and surprising, I don't mean gotchas. I don't mean laughing at your PCs going, ha ha, I got you. You didn't notice, blah. Like, that's not what I mean. But by foreshadowing it to at least give the information, even if the PCs forget it and they go, oh, when we saw that creature and it had like worms coming out of its mouth, oh, we should have known if we attacked the troll that it would vomit up worms, or that kind of thing. This is kind of weird, but giving a creature the power to eject another creature from it, why not? And again, this doesn't have to be something it necessarily wants to do. This might just be a side effect of what it is doing, whether it wants to or not. Slicing through the chest of a zombie might spill out, I don't know, snakes or insects or anything, but there's no reason why that can't be a thing. Hey, Caius, what's going on there? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Deadman. Yeah, I remember Werewolf the Apocalypse. Where Deadman continues on and says, "Or really nasty worms with balefire blood." Yeah. Again, turn that volume up to 11. Then nobody has it. Listen, these hazards don't need to be real world hazards. They could be hugely dangerous. Yeah. Kai's of Glantry says maybe vultures are immune to ghoul paralysis, which kind of makes sense. Who can tell the difference between an elf and a vulture anyway? Exactly, right? Who's to say they're not immune to it? And again, like, I'm just bringing up the ghouls and vulture thing because maybe in your world, this is just a natural byproduct of what's happening in your world. Maybe the ghouls care less about the vultures. It's just they wave their hands and keep them away, and maybe even the vultures land on their shoulders simply while they're eating their dead flesh or something, and it could care less. It neither bothers them nor helps them, kind of thing. Unless, of course, maybe the ghouls look out for circling vultures and they're led to dead bodies, which might be a way for them to track certain things, which your PC's covered with dead body parts and gristle and stuff because they're just like, I want to be blood covered, and everyone's like holding their nose because the barbarian is just like, oh my god, dude, really? And yeah, maybe the PCs are circled by something. And again, every encounter, the word encounter doesn't mean combat. It means literally an encounter. Much like experience points, people in the old days, experience points meant combat, but experience points, literally the first word is experience. And so what experiences are the players going through? Do they realize that they themselves are bringing about their own downfall because there are vultures circling overhead just waiting for one or more of the PCs to fall out, right? They could just be circling overhead waiting for their opportunity. When the PCs make camp, they're sitting up in the trees just waiting. There's death follows the PCs, and they're just waiting for one or more of the PCs to just drop dead at a moment's notice. Which I just thought of a pretty dangerous thing of how a player character could be killed in 5th edition, despite how easy it is for player characters to live. Because if a player is dropped to 0 hit points and is not immediately healed and brought back up, further attacks on them are done with, if I follow this rabbit hole, further attacks on them are done as a critical hit, and then that it also means that they fail a death save. So a player character gets knocked down to 0, could then be attacked by a flock of carrion birds who are then picking and chewing on the open wounds that the player may have. Or hell, they could just start eating at the player character that's like paralyzed or grappled or restrained or something. But whatever. Akaya says, what if a slod egg is a creature that dies? That zombie suddenly morphs into a slod? Can it be turned to stone? I don't know. I don't know, but I do love it though. Again, thank you for bringing up the slotty salads as they've been misspelled so many times. The slod are netherworld creatures, lower plane creatures that are very reminiscent of like frogs, although far more dangerous. Who's to say they don't live in that dark swamp that you have? Like in your game setting, maybe otherworldly things don't exist, or maybe your game is very gritty. Reskin, reflavor, reuse. They just happen to be frog people of the most dangerous type. Why not? Also, other than a dry, flat plain, swamps are pretty dangerous as well. Just trudging. Okay, just follow me on this. A swamp itself, just the concept of a swamp, stagnant water, dark, you can't see through it, living things living and breeding in the foliage and the dark water and the dead trees and branches that have fallen over and the dead carcasses, and you look into the water and you see nothing but like tadpoles and worms and alligators and snakes and all that stuff on one on top of the other on top of the other. Just in a real world sense, swamps are dangerous. Turn those swamps into like a primordial, dangerous, blackened, green, gray area. Just so nasty. I mean, instead of, for example, you could reskin something instead of your proverbial pit trap with the door that falls open and there's a 10-foot pit with spikes at the bottom. Who's to say that your quote unquote pit trap isn't falling into, oh, I don't know, dank water as the PCs are trying to trudge along the higher ground, only being an ankle deep in the muck and the mire. Swamps have mud. Swamps have deep water. You probably can't tell the difference between the two. Simply walking into dark water in a swamp and coming out of it might lead leeches and other kinds of nasties in and on your skin, in your clothing, all kinds of stuff that a swamp has. Swamps have, again, there could be fog and mist in the morning where you can't see. There are swamp gases that might be flammable or choking out in a swamp and whatnot. By the way, just as a plug, the next cinematic book coming out is called Wetlands. It talks about swamps and bogs, marshes, mires, shoals, estuaries, and everything in between. And why not use that in your world as if to say, like, what once used to be a green and verdant forest region may very well have turned into a swamp, and now, heck, it could be a rainforest or something for all we know, that life propagates life. And if you really, really, really want to take this and twist it on its head, we often associate necrotic energy with necromancy, with dead, with rot. But radiancy is often associated with light and life. But who's to say that the two aren't somehow intertwined in this diseased, parasitic environment? That there may be creatures that, for example, we often associate radiancy with life because we think of purity. We think of ourselves as humanity as being the thing given life. But as we already know, in our real world, there are lots of little bacterium and viruses and living things that live on our skin, live in our gut. And that radiancy might give life to the very things that are on our bodies. Irregardless of what we want as life, radiancy in a world like this might spring life eternal in a very uncomfortable manner for our own life, but very, very comfortable for the life in and around it. Caius of Galantia says, to simulate the danger of catching diseases you have no immunity to, maybe save saves against disease effects on a foreign continent or world could be 5 or 10 times higher, or basically 5 points or 10 points higher in terms of difficulty. Yeah, we talked about that the other day. I'll bring it up now, just to do a rehash. We talked about the fact that the the simple spells cure disease, you know, poison, curing someone from being poisoned, disease, curing, lesser restoration cures a condition. It could cure a symptom, but not actually cure the disease itself. Or someone can cure a disease, but they are still a carrier of that said disease. The person healing the individual could be afflicted by the same disease if they don't find a remedy for that disease itself. You could very well cure someone of a disease and it's still inside of them, right? Like, no, they're not suffering from it at all. But since they haven't washed their hands and are still eating diseased foods, they're just going to be re-exposed to it again. Or maybe the cleric in the group, we say clerics, but there's a lot of other people that heal, paladins, druids, et cetera, right, have access to healing now, and a bunch of other subclasses. But who's to say that they themselves aren't affected, but they're a carrier of that said thing? And again, like you're saying, Caius, depending on where you're from, much like in our own world, when explorers went from one region to another, many of them completely unaffected by the diseases or parasites they're carrying with them. They go to another place and they start spreading disease rampantly, because in one region, again, a cleric from the north might only know the 5 major diseases that affect them there, but if they go to the south, there's 6 more that they've never come across. And so it might require, like, literally learning a new version of those curatives, or beseeching the divine, or beseeching your patron or something to find a specific cure, or being given the keys to the specific cure to find a remedy against said thing. So yes, absolutely. Yeah, increasing the DCs, and as a matter of fact, I even brought up the idea of extending the tension. So being attacked by a troll and making a save to not catch something from its the rabies in its mouth or claws is one thing, but having someone attacked and letting things go and then asking the player, oh, it's been an hour later, make a saving throw. And they're like, what? Just make a save. And you make the save. Oh, well, I'm glad you were successful, because that scar, that one of the clerics healed, yeah, they didn't first clean it. They didn't remove the parasite or the diseased material that got into your flesh. So technically they healed it over, so you're infected and you might have to split your skin back open again. Sorry. Yeah, did not wash, quote, the parasite. Exactly. Now that might be a little bit of a gotcha, but if you foreshadow the idea that much like the Dungeon Master's Guide even has a alternate healing thing to make things grittier, and one of those healing mechanisms is you can say you must use a healer's kit to gain the benefits of healing. The same could be true here. You must have your wounds cleaned, or any healing you take might only be temporary, or might not help you at all. Or hell, if you don't make a correct or high enough Arcana check when you heal hit points on someone, you are also emboldening the other living things that are inside of those wounds themselves. So it might be far more dangerous to heal someone of their hit points if you haven't first cleaned the wounds or used some kind of remedy to make sure that there's nothing else alive inside of those wounds themselves. Maybe I'm going down a little bit of a deep path, but again, if this is your kind of thing, that's the whole point of us deep diving down these things. Now, another third pillarism, third pillar meaning exploration, of course, is all the things we talked about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, today can be clues to survival in the future, right? So much like finding treasure, finding gold, and those kind of things, finding remedies for these afflictions might be the quote unquote magic items, the reward, the treasure that the PCs come across. So instead of killing the creature and discovering its treasure hoard, maybe the PCs find, I don't know, a bush of good berries that grow in this region that aren't diseased, because every time the desert adapted druid tries to summon up their goodberry spell in this dead swamp, every time they summon it up, it's diseased on its own. That's a possibility as well. Yeah, yeah, exactly, Allie. Allie was just like, watch out for those feces-covered punji sticks in those rabbit holes. Yeah, nasty. And again, you know, I know you're both being sarcastic, and you're being funny, and you're being realistic. I mean, when the PCs come along, a big old pile of feces, that in itself might be a clue to something. Or I hate to say this, maybe there's something in the feces the PCs can scavenge when they realize that, oh, this animal eats this plant, maybe we need to get that plant. And one of the PCs is going to invariably say, but there's plant matter in the feces, why don't we just get it from there? And all the PCs are like, you go ahead and put your hands in there, we're going to go find one of these animals eating that plant, because that plant is good if we I don't know, soak it in our water and then place it against the wound or something, right? All these little details, if your players embrace it and you allow like an herbalistic style of thing. I mean, very easily, an easy way to reskin or reflavor this is to take your potions, take your scrolls, take your little gifts here and there. Hell, you could even reflavor inspiration in Dungeons and Dragons. You know, you get a D20 for doing something really cool and get inspiration. How about just calling it something else? In other words, what I'm saying is, allow people to have more than one inspiration, but literally you're giving it to them as a physical object. So someone finds, I don't know, they're unique beetles, and the beetles have an iridescent shell. And if you take the beetles and they're dead and you smoke them, if you break the shell open and eat the insides, you get a D20 on your save versus something, right? Hand out like the D20 that has a specific use, whether it is to resist an infection or resist a poison. It could be used for saves. It could be used for skill checks, like, oh, you've collected all those leaves and you've dried them out on the tree branches. Hey, make your medicine check, or make your arcana check, but you get a advantage on it by using this component or something. That's a pretty easy, very, very simple method to insert something, as well as encouraging your players to explore, because that's what we're talking about, third pillar exploration. If you're going to bother having them explore your setting, give them something because they're doing it, right? Have them find safe areas for them to be located at. Give them some way of alleviating the constant barragement of mosquitoes and flies and ticks and fleas and everything. You know, maybe there's some kind of smoke, or they find a tribe that uses some kind of salve or oil that they cover over their flesh, or there are certain types of incense that you alight in your campfire and you throw the incense in, or you just use the incense sticks, or maybe a small tin or the shell of those same beetles, and you pour the little oil inside of the shell and you leave it on a hot stone next to the fire, and this aroma starts to waft over the little campfire. And guess what? Guess what, guys? You are not going to be... Don't bother making those rolls because of the insects swarming around you, because you're using this thing to stay away from it. And the PCs, oh, thank goodness, we've made like 27 saving throws since we got in here. Again, when it comes to like exploration and the exploration pillar of the game, I feel that sometimes we psychologically preload ourselves to wanting to roll our eyes because we find it boring. In other words, both players and or game masters, many times when I hear conversations about how to make exploration more interesting, I feel this unconscious like, exploration, that's the boring part. Let's get to the exciting part, and end up defaulting into the most boring aspects of exploration, thereby proving the thought they had in their own head. Guys, just make a roll, make another roll, make another roll. Okay, fine. You got through the jungle. Okay, now you arrive at the real place, which is the dungeon. Great, you got to the mountain and the hill where the tribe is scared of what's carved in it. And you're like, well, wait a minute, what happened to the dark, dangerous method we get? Yeah, exactly. People are like, oh, another saving throw. But it behooves us to make those dangerous treks. If you have an accursed desert, if you have a deep, dark jungle that's hard to get through, 99% of the time, modern day, far future, there are these dangerous locations. The danger of those locations should really be, I don't know, dangerous. And so narrating how that comes about, don't just say, here, make a save or make an ability check and be done with it. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm saying if you really want them to feel the danger of it, make it interactive, make it narrative. In other words, if you're going to bother having them roll the dice in the first place, if something bad is going to happen to them if they fail, what happens if they succeed, right? What benefit do they get if they do succeed? Do they find that there's a patch of berries that are dangling off of the deep gorge where there's nothing but muddy water flowing beneath it, and maybe they go back and find it again? Sure, why not? Do they make friends with the tribe that exchanges goods with them, and they exchange them, something nasty that smells bad wrapped in leaves, and the PCs are like, what the hell is this? And they're like, we were looking for potions of healing. Why are they giving us these leaves, this nasty crap that they spit into and wrapped it in leaves? What are they doing? And you as a game master are like, do I need to hit you over the head with a clue stick? This is their version of a potion of healing? Things don't have to be, I don't know. Could be, it could be dingleberries. John Jacob Dingleberry Smith. His name was my name too. Oh shit, yeah. Hey, maybe in this diseased worlds, hill giants do walk around with dingleberries, and you gotta catch the dingleberry. But remember, you snatch a dingleberry, it's gonna wake up in a lot of pain. You never know. By the way, thank you, Dead Man, for reminding everyone over on Twitch and YouTube and the Discord over at Fantasy Grounds College. For those who don't know, if you join Fantasy Grounds College and join their Discord server, all the cool kids, that's us, hang out in the boiler room. So if you slide past all the administrative offices and the classrooms and sneak down into the boiler room down in the basement, that's where you might find a couple of empty bottles and weed smoke, the digital version, and then you'll see us hanging down there as well. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I really, really appreciate it. As a matter of fact, for those who don't know, tomorrow is Future Friday, and on Future Friday, we go into transhumanism in the tabletop RPG setting, specifically Eclipse Phase, Altered Carbon, The Expanse. It's like it is what we would consider today to be our new cyberpunk, as it were, right? So, yeah, tune in for Future Friday if you don't mind. And thank you, Dead Man. Yeah, guys, thank you so much for being part of this show, and thank you for supporting me. And if you're going to support me in any way with a like, share, subscribe, follow, get notifications or whatever, also support other small content creators as well. RJD20 is someone that one of the people that I'm following, and on Sundays we are going to have and we've already started a thing known as the Creators Conclave, where I spotlight people who are doing things. They may not be doing what I'm doing on YouTube, but they still are content creators. By the way, RJD2, if you go to rjd2.com or follow him on Twitch, he's got a blog as well. And just to let you know, there will be a Creators Conclave this Sunday. I will be interviewing someone on the channel Roll Stat. Doing something there. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for helping me making this channel what it is. Thank you so much. And just to let you know, there's a huge archive of these videos in the back. At least we're thinking at least 400 hours of content. You be free to watch it on, I don't know, 1.25, 1.5 speed or something, and get yourself a little kick out of it. So anyway, guys, thank you very much. We're coming to an end. Everyone have a great day. I will see you later. Bye.